And so it's no wonder that I end up in a hell of a lot of trouble trying to figure out and marry up what was so discordant within my feelings, my value. I didn't know who I was, and so I wasn't really acting as me, and that's why things felt so uncomfortable and lonely all the time. um, I had a string of really dysfunctional relationships, and they say that codependency is like a progressive disease. Boy, was it a progressive disease for me. Yeah. So I ended up in January 2020, that's right, at the tail end of a 2-year divorce that had ended up in court, of which I was told only 2% of divorces end up in court. I'd managed to enter all 3 of the justice systems within the United Kingdom. So I'd been to family court, I'd been to civil court, I'd been to criminal court because I was so like not present whilst driving that I went over the speed limit multiple times. Um, so it's safe to say that I was spiritually bankrupt, emotionally bankrupt, financially completely bankrupt. I was on my knees, and that's what brought me to CoDA's doors. And I'm really, obviously at the time, it was the hardest thing I've ever been through, but it was exactly what I needed to gain some sense of humility to be able to enter a program of addicts. And I deeply identify as an addict, but my I'm so special, yet undermined by a crippling sense of low self-esteem, wouldn't have got me into the rooms of a 12-step fellowship. Whereas now I'm part of multiple 12-step fellowships,. And this is my life. So I very much have accepted this path is for me, that I need to be here, but I wouldn't have come here willingly. My will would have definitely got in the way. And so it's only when I was at my rock bottom that I came to CoDA's doors. So yeah, that was in January 2020. And then pretty soon meetings went online because of COVID. And actually it gave me the huge advantage of being able to go to multiple meetings. I attended and just absorbed for like 6 months. And then I decided I wanted to do the steps. And I think, they say kind of the teacher appears when the student is ready, something like that. Well, I was really ready. And so I know that there's a huge shortage of sponsors in CoDA, but I managed to find someone pretty quickly, like when I realized I really was on my knees. And so I've actually had 3 sponsors in total taking me through the steps. The first 2 steps were taken by someone who was in my face-to-face group. And all 3 have been absolutely brilliant. Then I had a what I call bunny hop sponsor that took me through step 3. And I looked for somebody who really just emanated kind of a radiance when speaking about their higher power. And I loved that. And then from the step 4, and actually we went over the first 3 steps again, but to the end of the steps, and who is my present sponsor now, that was my 3rd sponsor. So I've been through 3 sponsors. And I'll go through kind of the tools in just a bit, because it sort of outlines my journey through the steps, because going through the steps brings up all the tools. I mean, there are a number of tools, but it's like you can't really avoid them if you do the steps. It's a real deep dive into all the tools. And having done the 12 steps, it has miraculously changed the quality of my life and relationships beyond measure. The promises that I first read, thinking they were just like, fairy dust and rainbows, like this is never going to happen to me. And some of them I didn't even realize I was without, like, I won't be lonely anymore. I kind of didn't even know I was lonely. It was like almost discovering where I was and who I was. And then slowly but surely the promises came true, every one. And it's not that I feel completely living in them at every single moment. I still struggle. I still have to hand over my life every single day. I'll still be aware of compulsions coming up every single day to act in my defects. And so for me, it's literally a daily commitment to living my life in a different way. But it doesn't feel like work anymore, because it's like the rewards are so incredible that it's kind of like, why wouldn't I make the effort to walk down to the shops to buy the lottery ticket if I know I'm going to win every day? It's kind of like that, you know, it's just, it really pays off. It really pays off to do the work. And yeah, okay, so I'm going to go through the tools. So the first tool was actually what I say is like a question. So I remember when I finally decided to leave my marriage, and it was following a string of really uncomfortable events. And I was still in limbo as to, do I stay or do I go? And a dear friend said to me, he asked me two questions, and he said, what would you do if, and my daughter's called, what would you do if I was in exactly the same position? What would you want for her? And then suddenly, as soon as that question was asked, it was like the, the uncomfortable truth was crystal clear, that never in a million years would I want my daughter to stay in the relationship that I was in. And once that denial is ripped off or slowly peeled off, depending on which way the plasters come off, it's really hard to go back into denial when it's so affronting. So that was the first question. I knew instantly what I would want or not want for my daughter. And the second question was, what would I do in the absence of fear? Absence of what, you know, my mum would think of me, the community would think of me, the fear of failure, the fear of being alone, of being financially, you know, a single parent. What would I do in the absence of fear? And those two questions, I find, I still use today. They really cut through the stuff. And the reason why I think that, like, the first one works is because as a codependent, I'm really good at knowing what is a caring and loving and kind thing to do for somebody else. That's kind of my thing, you know. As a codependent, I ask, what are you feeling? What do you need? What do you want? Because then I'll bend myself over backwards to, you know, give you that, make that happen. Where I'm not, and it's because, you know, I've got so much stuff to work on that is so uncomfortable that I'll look outside. I'll want to fix you and fix your problems, get my nose in your business, because my business is way too painful to look at, right? That's where it all comes from for me. But I'm really good at being able to kind of think, what's the loving thing to do for somebody else? But I wasn't a good at all at doing it for myself. And that's why I kind of take it out of the picture of, like, who do I really love in my life in a way that, you know, is incomparable. It's like my daughters, you know, my children. So that's why I find that works really well. So that was kind of the first thing that really projected me into some type of different behavior, which was, yeah, leaving my marriage, against huge struggle. And then the second thing I found really helpful in the early, especially in the early stages, I didn't know how I felt. I would feel like I'd just be able to say, I feel uncomfortable. I'd feel it viscerally. It's like I would be sitting in that room with my solicitor, and she would say something of, you know, taking an action, which I found literally I'd be like pooping my pants with fear over. And I could feel the adrenaline in my body being released, the cortisol. I could literally feel like my fat cells burning away. I just felt like my whole body was on fire with acid. But if you'd asked me, okay, what do you feel? I might have just said really bad. I couldn't name my feelings. So something I found was really helpful is, like, you know, the feelings wheel that has all the different adjectives for feelings. And then, and I mentioned this at my last talk, doing a facts and feelings, because if I don't know what I'm feeling, what I definitely can't do is separate the feelings from the facts. So I was actually looking through all my CoDA books, and I've used it loads. I've used facts and feelings loads, and I got an example. I've got so many, but it's like just kind of as a working example, I thought I'd share some stuff. So this was, I don't know when the date was, but I put down, okay, facts. Mum rang me to tell me that, and there's a name, but it's what would have been my ex-sister-in-law, if that makes sense. Mum rang me to tell me that she's engaged. Fact, I'm divorced. Fact, I want the fairy tale still. Fact, I fear the fairy tale. And then I put, and this was obviously some time into recovery, because I didn't come into this program with a higher power or God, but I put, fact, God is by my side. I trust God has a plan for me regarding what I need, not what I want, and that God loves me without question. And then in terms of feelings, I put down in big capital letters, angry. Angry at mum's happiness over that news. Um, angry with the presumptions that she wants me to be engaged. I don't need to know her news from mum. Yeah, with a big exclamation mark. I resent my sister-in-law for ignoring me on my 40th birthday after the divorce. Why should I congratulate her? I feel jealous and I feel shame. I imagine, and this is actually, yeah, I imagine them all bitching about me, and I can't actually read all my writing. And I put, and I feel fearful. Okay, so I mean, that, I don't know whether that's a good example or not, but it's just an example of like going through what the actual facts are and how I feel about it. And what I find it does, as journaling always does, which is a tool in itself, somehow it brings me to some clarity, and usually it picks up on my defects. So, you know, if I'm stuck in the anger, whenever I'm angry, I'm in a more than position. And my more than position is, Mum, you rang me, you did a wrong thing. I don't like it, you're wrong. Whereas when I look at my feelings, what I actually uncover is, okay, fear. Fear is never in alignment with God's purpose for me. Fear is never in line with recovery. It's in line with my defects. Shame is crippling, and it kind of, it makes everything foggy. I can't think clearly in that, but it's certainly, again, not aligned with God. Jealousy, jealousy. It's like it kind of helps me do part of my inventory and really get to what the core things underneath it, and see and start by picking away at my part so I can then look at it in more detail. That's what I find kind of the facts and feelings leads to. It's real clarity. I mean, there's one other thing, which was one of the biggest, most shameful thing I shared on my step 4. And I wrote down the facts of the event that took place when I was a teenager. And then I was really shocked to see on the feelings, it was like I put things like, I feel like I should be punished. I feel like I have no right to live. I feel, it was, and I couldn't believe how like severely I was judging myself. So that what came out of that facts and feelings was that, Sarov, you're just a human being and you deserve love, and you had no intention of doing that. And I could just see how harshly I was judging myself, whereas I wasn't really aware of how severe those feelings were when I looked upon the event in itself. So yeah, I find that facts and feelings can be really helpful, especially in a fog of emotion and confusion. So that's a nice tool. Number 3, I put down my morning routine, just because, okay, so not a day goes by when I don't do my routine of the day. I say morning. Now, when I first started off in recovery, it was very, my will was definitely there because it was like, I have to do it in the morning. I have to do it in this way. And like, I get kind of really stressy about it, like almost like I was going to self-combust if I didn't do it. Like I was going to kill somebody if I didn't do my routine. And then the stress would perpetuate not doing it, so that I actually act in my defects, to the point where my girls would say to me, Mummy, have you done your prayers yet? Because you're being a bit moody. And it's like I'd put so much attachment on doing them as the fix, that in itself I was like, I was kind of doing the whole thing as an addict, basically. So now I just find that any time before noon is good enough. So I call it my morning routine, but it's any time, yeah, before noon. But I will put time aside in my day to really connect with God. And if I don't, I just find the day runs smoother. It kind of sets me up for the day. And I'll go through my whole morning routine because that covers loads and loads of tools. So the first thing, in fact, yeah, I'll go to my shrine. So the first thing, when to do the morning routine, my sponsor said to me, right, choose a place in your house or outside, choose a place you can go to and set up a shrine. And that's part of your kind of homework. It was a part of a step 3 homework. And she said, put on it things that you really connect with. And again, I didn't know myself, so I kind of had to discover what I connected with. So I put on things that I felt like I should put on, like a statue of, a particular god from my family of origin, or I put things that I felt I should connect with, not necessarily what I did connect with. And my shrine has evolved with time, as has my morning routine. So, um, so for example, okay, I start the day, I start it with singing, and I kind of really belt out as though no one is listening. And at the beginning, I chose songs again that I felt like I should be singing, like godly songs. But now I'll like sing loads of stuff. I will sing songs that just connect with me in a way that I feel like my soul's on fire. And I really will sing my heart out. So that's the first thing I do. And I drink my coffee, and I basically engage with all the senses. So I do it in a place where the first thing I do is I'm looking out the window, and in my garden, I have this tree, which is so bountiful, either with blossom when it's apple blossom, or at the moment, they're apples just like littering it. And to me, that reflects the abundance in the world. It reflects God's abundance, and that God wants me to live in abundance, wants, everyone, all God's children to live in abundance. When I think there is not enough, not enough time, not enough love, not enough prosperity, not enough serenity, it's a lie. Every, blade of grass, there are millions out there. All the flowers. If I look outside, I'm just reminded that the world is full of abundance. And yeah, it connects me. The other thing about this tree that I have in my garden is that a while ago, I think in the 1960s or something, there was a massive storm, and the tree that was upright got blown right over, I've been told. And it's now on its side. It's like it looks like it's completely severed from its roots, but it's not, because it is absolutely blooming. And it has two types of roses growing within it as well. So it's just, everything's like intertwined from the ground up. And to me, when I look at this tree, it reminds me of my story, in the sense that it's been blown down by the storm, but though I didn't see it before, to me, it is beautiful. It's beautiful in its brokenness, and it's thriving, not just surviving. So I kind of basically, I engage visually using my visual senses outside. I engage in an audio way to the song. I make sure that when I'm drinking my coffee, I really taste it. Like, I make sure I can sort of feel it going down my throat. So I'm getting really, really present basically with everything. And I do it barefoot so I can feel myself on the ground. So that's how I start off kind of my routine, trying to be really present and engaged in what I'm doing. And it's part of like the connection, I think, is working on that concordance. So I found that a lot of, when growing up, it was like there was a huge amount of discord that led to my codependency. It's like I'm feeling really sad inside, but I'm smiling like a Cheshire cat. I'm putting on a brave face, I'm really panic inside. There's a massive discord going on with actually what's happening and my physicality. So when I can get present and real and really feel into what I'm doing at that time, it helps with that concordance, and is that I find can be really helpful. It's almost like somatic work, really getting in my body. Then I'll sit down to meditate, and my meditation journey has been quite interesting. So I like many codependents, I think, traveled around with a hole in my soul, and I deep dived into many spiritual kind of adventures to try and fill this hole. So I did actually go on a whole meditation retreat in Tibet, in Spain. I like learned how to meditate kind of properly, how to sit exactly and do all that stuff. And for a while I had success. Now I say that in inverted commas because it's success defined by what I think I should be doing. Like, can I stay completely present and my mind doesn't wander at all, and I'm really there? That was very short-lived, that successful meditation. That really doesn't happen for me that much, actually. I can't sit down for hours or any lengthy period of time without my, what's referred to as a monkey mind, without stuff coming in and out of my mind all the time. But actually, I think the journey for me is not so much about like I'm getting better at the meditation of just staying there. It's about me getting more accepting about the fact that I can't. That's what it is. So now, okay, I do sit down with my feelings, and that's where I can usually stay with it, and it's really helpful. So if I'm feeling feelings, or for example, sit down, I'll think, okay, what am I feeling? And I'll start off bodily. So okay, my hips hurting a bit, or my toes itching, or whatever. It'll start with the bodily feeling, but then it's like, what am I emotionally feeling? And I find that things do come up, but I'm thinking. It's not like I'm not just. I haven't yet got to the point where for a long time I can just concentrate on my breathing, and maybe I will get there, and maybe I won't, but that's okay. I think I'm actually really okay with that for now. So that in itself has been a journey. So I do meditate for like 10 minutes. Um, I pray. So I actually use the CoDA step 1, 2, 3 prayers that I've added like a little bit to. So I've changed them very slightly and added extra bits to it. And when I sit down on my knees and I say the step 3 prayer that we've just recited together, I open my hands, and like for me, it's just like listening out for God, waiting for God's visions, messages. Um, and sometimes they're really clear actually. And and talking about visions, okay, so I'm going to show you. I want to show it briefly because there's some embarrassment here. But I do have the bravery to show you. Okay, so I can't see me on screen actually. I could probably if I try. But I've got a visions board, right? So I have a visions board, and okay, I'll put it away because I'm just going to explain it. But I recently had a conversation with one of my outreach fellows talking about visions, and I was expressing some guilt because, like, one of the visions was actually about kind of materialistic things. It wasn't, I want a Ferrari, but it was like I want a home of a certain type that so I was expressing these things, and we spoke about the visions where I heard something really beautiful, which was if these thoughts come from nowhere. Like, for example, in my profession, imagining myself up on a stage, speaking to a group of people, sharing my passion, sharing my love in my profession, and influencing others in a positive way that really adds to other people's lives. If I'm visioning in my mind, I literally had like a vision coming in my mind when I was praying of me standing in front of a huge crowd of people. I think there's part of me that's definitely accepting that it's God that's giving me these visions, perhaps, and sometimes not. And I suppose it's just for me to take the next right step in alignment with that vision and see what materializes from that. Because I find that if it's God's vision for me, the right people will come into my life to assist that vision. If it's the right vision, it will lead to a more loving, balanced, um, wonderful life, essentially. But it's just about taking that next right step and not feeling guilty about the fact that one of my visions was having this beautiful home with a view to die for. Or okay, so part of my visions is I have been out of an intimate relationship for 6 years now. And I got to the stage where I realized that part of what's holding me back is fear, for sure. And so I did, like, as part of my visions board, I put photographs of relationships between people that really inspired me. So I kind of, with my vision board in front of me, that's when I sit down and meditate. And I kind of meditate on these visions as well and see what God might reveal to me. So yeah, visions board is kind of another tool. Reading literature. Oh, I feel so grateful in CoDA. In CoDA, we have a wealth of literature. So my favorites are in fact, I presented last time, the PDF, which is the defects and the recovery differences, the patterns and recovery differences. That is a favorite of mine that I use whenever I do my step 10, which is regularly, not every day, but I still use it to identify kind of if I have a problem. Usually it requires an inventory. I need to find out my part so I can begin to try to take the next step. So that always comes out. I love the CoDA prayer. So when I was doing my CoDA steps, I like printed it off and literally was on my book, my journal. so that I could use, the prayer every time before I did any step work pertaining to that particular step. I use that prayer. The pamphlets, I mean, I love the boundaries pamphlet. That's incredible. But and every day I'll read the CoDA meditation of the day. So that's like a kind of a given. That will be every single day that I'll read that. And then the next part of my routine is affirmations in the mirror. So affirmations started off with huge resistance because I just felt really silly doing them in the mirror and telling myself that I loved me, and it just felt really like a bit cheesy, I guess. But I've like really embraced the cheese. Like I properly passionately say my affirmations. And again, they've evolved with times. I mean, I've got my affirmations sheet here, it's riddled with like scribblings and things. But I was going to share some of my affirmations, which is just for today, I will listen to the whisperings of feelings that guide my actions in line with my higher power's will for me and the wants and needs of my little girl. Just for today, I trust that my higher power will ensure that all my needs are met at the right time. I, Sarovi, strive each day to compassionately embrace my perfectly imperfect humanity. And if I fall short of mine or others' expectations, I allow myself to be cradled in love, faith, and acceptance. Every day, I'm learning to love, accept, and appreciate my beautiful, ever-changing, God-given body, just as it is. And like, so I try to make them really personal and try and use really passionate language to evoke a feeling so that they're not just empty words. Having said that, they probably just start off as empty words, but then they took a life of their own. Whenever I find there's a sticky defect of mine, usually the recovery pattern, then I'll try and incorporate that into an affirmation. So for example, one I've been using recently is, I value the opinion of those I trust without needing to gain their approval. I have confidence in myself. So that's the other thing I'll kind of use either the promises for, and I used to recite the promises in the mirror every day, or all the recovery patterns that I really want to work on. And actually, one of the things I did at the beginning to get myself familiar with that PDF, that recovery patterns and differences, was a jar. So in fact, what I'll do is I'll show you a photograph of my shrine in a second. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna screen share a photograph of my shrine at present, which has been a work in progress. I'll explain a little bit about each thing that's on my shrine. There we go, I think. Yeah, okay, you can see that, right? So in the background, this is actually a picture that my dear fellow made for me for my birthday. And in Hinduism, the religion I grew up with, Ganesh is the remover of obstacles. And I have a real kind of affiliation with Ganesh growing up. Whenever leaving the house, we'd always say, Shri Ganesh, which means kind of hail Ganesh. And so it was kind of like it's like good luck almost. So she stenciled Ganesh over different cuttings of the CoDA literature. So there's little tearings of like, the boundaries leaflet, and you can see the CoDA emblem perhaps there. And she did that. And I mean, I cried like a baby when I opened it. I was so moved and touched. But, seeing that every day, apart from obviously directly referring to CoDA literature, it just reminds me of the love that I've been so grateful to receive through this program. Then you can see a vase. So I've got the vase here on my table. And I try and put fresh flowers in that every day. Again, just because I really connect through God with nature. But you can see that it's like a vase of a woman's body. And, she's no like skinny mini. This is like a really voluptuous woman who is, in middle age, I imagine, or something. And I purposely choose like objects to do with really real femininity, because I've really struggled with body issues my life, as I think is pretty typical when it comes to child trauma and all that kind of stuff. And looking at that, it just helps me connect to my feminine body and the beauty of it. So I've got also a candle there, which is shaped as a woman. I've got a little present that my daughter gave me on Mother's Day, which is the dancing flower. It says best mum. I've got, and I'll show you in a second, an amends jar, a God box, a Ganesh statue, a little photograph of Lakshmi, and also a calligraphy framed quote that my friend drew for me. So yeah, okay, I'm going to stop screen sharing because I've got these things here. Stop share, here we go. Okay, brilliant. So I'll go through because these are some of the tools. So this is my amends jar. I made this in a pottery class, and I purposely, much to the teacher's horror actually, I decided to just like spray it randomly with paint as opposed to like meticulously draw something beautiful. I was just like, I just went wild with it. I went crazy. And that was, for me, it was like, okay, my child within, my imperfectionism, just go with it, that sort of thing. So there's my amends jar. And what I do is that whenever I've hurt myself, whenever I've abandoned myself, I write a note, and I write it in a really loving tone, as if my higher power were to write it to me. So I haven't read this as in before now. I may stop halfway if it's really embarrassing, but it's like, I put an at the top of it, and I put, my gorgeous girl, I am so sorry that you experienced that. I'm sorry that I did not remove you sooner, and I let that person into your home when you felt so unsafe. I'm sorry that I'm going to go on. Yeah, I'll stop. But it says, your boundaries are violated, and it was unacceptable. Full stop. Let's keep safe. I'm going to keep you safe. I love you. It's like I'll write myself a really loving note. And then I have a God jar, a God box, which that's when I write to God. And it says on the top, very faded, God, I ask that you might help me work through my problems to your glory and your honor. Amen. And in this, you can see it's really full. I'll write letters to God, about challenges that I have. And then what I do is I take both my amends and my letters to God. And it was a suggestion by my sponsor to go down to the river and release it to the river, which I make a regular ritual of this, essentially. Often I'll go alone, but when it started, I went down with my daughters, and I meant to kind of, read it and release it, but they got really interested, and they said, oh, mummy, can we read? Now, a lot of these letters at the time was about their dad, and they weren't particularly complimentary in the sense that I was struggling, I was really challenging, and I didn't want them to read them. So I started like tearing them up in front of them. And they were delighted at this, and they kind of grabbed all the little bits, and they stood in the middle of the river, and they flung it out, and it came down this beautiful cascade, and they said, oh, it's like confetti, mummy. And so from that day, it got coined Freedom Confetti, and that river is still referred to by my girls and I as Freedom Confetti River. And so we often go down together and release these things. I'll also do the same with particular defects I'm working on that I want to surrender. Anything that I want to surrender and give away, I go down to the river and release it. We'll say prayers beforehand, then release. But, similar things can be done. I'd say kind of to take this on as a tool, it's really what speaks to you individually. So another thing would be like to burn them. I remember burning a diary, actually. In fact, I don't think it was even, I didn't mean to, I left my candle on my shrine, and I was like, okay, well, that's that done then, that's surrendered, But you could burn them in a fire. And in fact, I did that with my court documents. So all the documents in family court that went over all the allegations of domestic abuse and things, it was really unhealthy for me to go back and read those. So with my dear fellow and my sponsor, we burned them. We had a whole ceremony of burning those documents. And that was like, and I guess another tool. Things can be released like in those Chinese lanterns, or you know, there can be loads of ways. You can bury it in the garden. I mean, anything that feels like freedom and release is a great thing. So I'd say kind of, if you want to do that, make it your own. And I think that's underlying everything, actually. I think that's probably come across, that whatever tool is used, it comes alive with two things: higher power and authenticity. And every single one of us are different human beings with different wants, feelings, needs, different personalities. It's like, this is, I think, what has really come home from the CoDA program. It's like, be me. I don't need to try and pretend to be anyone else. Be me. And everything flows and stems from that. And that applies to the tools as well. So another tool on the shrine is this. And this is made by me from a fellow, where I gave them, actually, as a present, the gold lacquer here. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Japanese art of, I can't remember what it's called, something like Kawasaki. I don't know. No, it's not. It's the Japanese art where it comes from a story that there was a king, and the king had a beautiful bowl, and it got broken. So they gave the bowl to be mended by one of their, you know, their servants at the time. And it came back lacquered in glue, and it just looked really ugly. So the king rejected it and said, no, go away and make this look beautiful. So what they did was they lacquered all the cracks with gold, and it looked more beautiful than when it started. And it's still the Japanese tradition today. And the reason I had the bowl on my shrine is that it reminds me of where I came from and where I am, in the sense that, and this will be the last kind of, bit before the break I'll share, and then we can go into the break. It reminds me that the blueprint I grew up with for happiness in life was get a great looking, successful, rich Indian husband, have children, live in a big house, have a good car, have a great job, and that is the equation for happiness. And what I've ended up with is, I'm divorced, I'm a single parent, I see my children half the time versus every day, watching them grow up. I don't have a big house and I don't have a big car. And I am genuinely happier than I've ever been. And that's not to say every single second of every day I'm living in joy, of course not. But I feel more loved, more grounded, connected, present, grateful, and serene, more than I ever did in my previous blueprint of life that I was striving so hard to achieve. So it's like, this is my life. It's completely broken compared to what it should have been. But boy, is it more beautiful.
Thank you, Sarovi. Someone messaged Kintsugi. Does that sound right? For the bowl.
Kintsugi, thank you so much. That's exactly it. Kintsugi, thank you.
That was from from the room.
Thank you, and thanks so much for posting all those links. My goodness, that's amazing. Thank you. Before I went on break, I kind of waved this in front of the screen. I'm holding a jar full of different colored pieces of paper, but I didn't actually elaborate on what this was. I think I missed that. So this is, I took the PDF that's now been posted in the chat, but that I refer to about the recovery patterns and differences. And what I did is I printed out each type of pattern on a different color paper. I like colors, it's my perfectionism. So like control was red and compliance was blue. And so all the different patterns, I printed them out onto different colored piece of paper. And I cut each pattern out separately and I folded it up and I put it into this jar. So this is my pattern jar. And what I started off doing in the mornings was that I would just, so I would choose like a particular pattern. So I just rummage around, it's like a lucky dip. And I'd read that pattern out for the day. So this one is avoid emotional, so this is avoidance. Avoid emotional, physical, or sexual intimacy as a way to maintain distance. And then the recovery is I engage in emotional, physical, or sexual intimacy when it is healthy and appropriate for me. So I'd pick out a pattern a day and I'd think, okay, this is the pattern I'm going to work on. That's my kind of thing to concentrate for the day. And it kind of looks, the whole jar looks so pretty. So actually, when I put it on my shrine, my girls who were around sort of 4 and 5 at the time were like, oh, I want to go. And they just got obsessed. They'd like fight. So at one point they were picking out 2 patterns a day and they'd literally want to pick it out and then they'd sit on my lap and read it. So for me, this kind of almost is like a bit of a step 12 as well, because it's really passing on recovery in a way that prior to entering CoDA, I would do it in a very controlling, enforced way with my girls. And when I kind of realized, almost like when somebody tells you the world is round versus flat, that, oh, I don't have the right to control anybody, then it was like, okay, I need to stop doing that. So I really backed away from shoving spirituality in their face. And the irony is that, like every single time I surrender, and the outcome is more wonderful and beautiful than my wildest imaginings when my higher power takes reign, they just started picking up the patterns themselves. And they know the serenity prayer just because I say it every day, as opposed to making them learn it and things. So yeah, that's another nice little tool as well that I got off a fellow. And just on my shrine as well, to finish off the shrine, I've put things like, a candle that my daughter bought me for Mother's Day. And just, it can be like a twig that I pick up from a walk that looked pretty. It can be anything as glamorous or mundane and simple as possible. And actually talking about that in a way, because I wrote this and thought, well, this is a bit shy. I'll get a bit shy sharing this, but no, this is vulnerability. This is good for me. So one of the things that I took my sponsee through actually when it came to the steps was, in step 1, I actually gave them the assignment of, when you make your shrine, your altar, I want you to make a step 1 altar. And by that, I want you to take objects that signify each aspect of your unmanageability. So for example, and like I didn't do this when I was going through the steps with my sponsor, but I did with my sponsee. And I was thinking, if I was to do this from step 1 for me, for example, on my altar to unmanageability would be a packet of sleeping tablets. When I'm in unmanageability, my sleep goes to shit, basically, forgive my French. It just goes down the pan. I'm too busy obsessing and worrying and compulsively thinking over stuff. So sleeping tablets would be on my altar to unmanageability. So would a sanitary pad. I pause because I get shy, but when I was going through my divorce, I was so stressed, my body just shut down. It wasn't safe for a child to be brought into the world when there was so much trauma around. And the body knows this, the body doesn't allow for reproduction when it's like a war zone. I mean, obviously not a real war zone. In my life, it was just an emotional war zone. So that would probably be on my altar to unmanageability. So would the court documents and the files, and probably a photograph of me looking really gaunt. So I lost a tremendous amount of weight when I was going through my divorce. And I mean, that was just the pinnacle of what brought me to CoDA. But generally, I've got a whole list of things I touch upon when I go into unmanageability, whether it's poor eating, poor sleeping, getting really like impatient and antsy with people. And so anything that can represent these particular unmanageabilities can go up on the step 1 altar. And then again, with my sponsee, what I did was I said, okay, in step 2, I want you to write a help wanted list. So what is your ideal higher power? If it's not a higher power, if we've not got that far, if you just had somebody who could come and help you in every single way that you could, what would that help wanted ad look like? So you write down a list, essentially, the qualities you want in a higher power. And then I said, okay, choose those, an object now to put on in next to your altar of unmanageability. Create objects on that to represent the qualities in which you want your higher power to have. And then actually, as part of the step 3 process, what I got them to do was marry up the qualities of their higher power next to the object of their unmanageability that would then take away help take away that particular defect or unmanageability. And then eventually it's removing the kind of the ode to unmanageability off the shrine, and then developing it into a shrine kind of that your higher power evolves into, because it is an evolution. So that was kind of one of the some of the tools I took my own sponsee through when it came to a shrine. Okay, the next thing on my list is Honopopo. So yeah, I mentioned this last time. It's to do with affirmations as well. I do it with my mirror work. So and my amends jar as well. So when I hurt myself, I go against the mirror and I put my forehead on the mirror and I say, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I love you. Thank you. And I repeat that a number of times until I kind of, again, I just feel it in my body. And I think the origin of that Honopopo, it's a Hawaiian forgiveness or self-compassion kind of, routine or mantra. But there's a really beautiful story that I read, which was about a physician, I think, and he had a number of ill patients, and forgive me because I'm sort of summarizing it or paraphrasing it as it would be, but a physician that had a number of patients that were sick, and he took the notes at the end of the day, and he just spent a significant amount of time touching the notes and repeating this, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, thank you. And his patients started getting better. And however that's taken, whether it's kind of voodoo, magic, you don't want to, it's like the whole take what you like and leave the rest. But I did find it a really beautiful thing. And as a scientist, in my profession, I'm a scientist. It's all about facts. But what I find really interesting is the science that we're finding is evolving really matches some of the old or even the modern contemporary spiritual practices, and it is able to back it up. So for example, things like that, they're beginning to discover the reason why it works is because we have, neuroplasticity in our bodies. We have nerves that are capable of changing according to what we feed them. Essentially, they are capable of changing. So and that's like the positive reinforcement. I mean, we give ourselves messages all the time. We may as well choose better ones, right? That's what I'm thinking. So even if that's the only reason you do it, that's a nice kind of ritual. Gratitude list. So that's one that's very common. I tend to, I find that I don't necessarily do a separate gratitude list, but when I do my step 10 at the end of the day, the first question I ask for my step 10 is, what feelings did I have today? And often gratitude will come up again and again and again. If I'm feeling some self-pity, longing, grasping, that's when I definitely need to do a gratitude list, because gratitude turns crumbs into a feast. Still one of my favorite slogans. And it can be down to the simplest of things. And I think it's all about repetition as well. Like, I find that if I don't engage in the tools, if I don't engage in recovery, what happens is that I slowly go downhill. Actually, I haven't stepped away for long enough to really see this, but I just know this, that then I'd reach crisis. And then suddenly using all these tools and expecting miracles is a really tough ask. I mean, to be fair, nothing is beyond higher power. But to practice these on a regular basis just really builds up resilience to the storm. So it's making like a daily or a regular practice these things. So doing a gratitude list, not just when I'm in self-pity, but regularly. And I started a miracles list. So my first sponsor said, why don't you start a little kind of super achievement in CoDA list or miracles list? And I did, and I now record like even the smallest of things. In fact, on my step 10, it's like, what things did I do today to take care of myself? And it can be as smallest thing as having a bath, putting in a boundary, eating a healthy meal, exercising. It can be really small stuff. It can also be really big things. Like saying no is a great one to write down. But I've had some really, really big miracles. And I thought I'd share a couple, one of late. And yeah, so I'll share my miracle. So I was like in unmanageability because there was a school down the road. Okay, so the way it works in England, if you want to get into a school that's a state-based school, not a private school, you have to live in a certain zip code. You call it zip codes over there, right? Postcodes, zip codes. And I went to this open day, amazing school. Yeah, loved it. I own a house that's not in the catchment area for that. And so I started when I was still really striving for co-parenting. I was going to say tip. I don't want to give advice, but something that I've learned, a deeply codependent human being, that is me, and a narcissist cannot co-parent. Parallel parenting will have to do. Just so that was a really, really hard lesson for me to learn, but a really good one. So, okay, at the stage where I was still desperate to co-parent with all the will in my heart and body, okay, we discussed with my daughter's father, with my ex-husband, about moving. Now, I own my house, so it's kind of a bigger deal, and he was renting. And so actually there was an offer for him to move. I thought, great, but it came on the condition that I'm going to use the American terms, alimony would be stopped. I'll move, but I'm stopping the alimony. We call it child maintenance over here. And I was in a real tizzy. I was like obsessing over this problem. I couldn't sleep. I was using all the tools like an addict in terms of I was going real busy with it. I was really busy. And I took this moment where I was journaling and I was doing facts and feelings, in fact, and I was doing this. And I just went, in fact, she might answer now. I went, what is God's will for me right now? So I knew she would answer. Okay, but that proves my point because, okay, I'm going to refer to that electronic CI as A, okay, because then we won't get another answer. So I asked this question to A, and A answered, and I kid you not, and I can't remember the exact but I said, what is God's will for me right now? And it quoted from the Bible. It said verse, I don't know, I don't read the Bible. Verse 5, this, and God said unto David, I will build you a house. And I was like, could you be more specific? I sound like Chandra from Friends now, but that is insane. And do you know what? I've asked that question over 25 times in exactly the same words. Then I've changed the words slightly, thinking maybe I said it differently on the day. I have never, ever received that answer. And I've never received an answer pertaining to God either. It's been really random stuff, like you just heard about stocks and shares and the price of gold or something. I have never got that answer, but I got an answer about building me a house. And I was like, oh my goodness. And then as doubting Thomas, I was like, no, but seriously, that can't be the case. So what I did was, okay, I actually happened to at that time have this real burning desire, I guess, higher power, messaging me, that I wanted to visit a church on a Sunday. And I Googled churches near me. And the first one that came up, I clicked on the video where it was some of the, congregation was sharing about what their church had given them. And I recognized two people in the video. One was a father of my daughter's best friend, and one was the teacher that they had. One of the most lovely, I really connected with her, the teacher, the primary school teacher. And I thought, oh my gosh, I already know people here. Right, let me look up where this church is. And I looked up the location of the church, and it was held within the school that I had visited. And I was like, okay, I'm receiving a really, really clear message here, a really clear message. And within literally a week, I opened up discussions about kind of moving out of my house. And I happened to find that the estate agent said, you won't believe it, I have the perfect house for you. And I was thinking, yeah, crap, because you're always going to say that, right? To just sell it to me or whatever. And it was actually, I was going to rent my house to move into this rental. That's what I was going to I end up doing. And that's why I'm at this house. And I looked at it, and it was literally something out of my vision. It's like, the holiday, it's like that perfect little English country cottage with an open fire. I was like, this is the house of my dreams. I can't believe it. And, within weeks, I moved. I was self-supporting and I didn't have to get into any arguments or who moves and alimony. And it was just put it to rest. It's like, you know how can I take it into my own hands so I don't have to play into this power dynamic and enable and do all my stuff, do the whole codependency dance. And God gave me a way out. So that for me was a massive, massive miracle. Um, and actually, the other thing is it's the only rental property in the whole village. So places like this don't come up for rent. It was just crazy. It was really, really, really divinely led, without a single shadow of a doubt. I had a recent miracle, which is really beautiful. So as part of my living amends to my sister, I painted a bowl with all our childhood memories. But what I didn't do, which is what I would have done, is I didn't cover it in stuff that would have made fun of her. Originally I was going to put like sarcasm was a big thing growing up. And it was when my sponsor said, yeah, sarcasm and teasing, they're actually mild forms of bullying. And then it really hit me. The amount of times I'd use sarcasm to connect with people, and the amount of times I'd used kind of banter and undermining them and teasing them and essentially making fun of them to get this sort of playful one-upmanship to try and connect with you. It's so warped. It's really insane. I realized that was a massive thing. So how my siblings and I would connect would be to undermine each other, essentially. And I thought, I'm not doing any of that on this bowl. And I spent, it was so joyful. I spent months painting this bowl, just putting down all the wonderful things that I felt we shared in our childhood. Like I put loads of love into it. And then I was going to London and I took it to visit her, and I took it on the train. I left it on the seat. And I was like, oh, it was really, really hard for me. And what I didn't want to do is make this big thing about how I'd spent so long, because again, growing up, I was like the perfect one. I was the oldest one. And I really milked that. It was like, let it all be about me and how giving I am, and how, I was really aware that I didn't want to do this whole, oh, I spent so long and it was this and that. I kind of just needed to stay really humble and silent with it, but it really hurt. And it was a real process of letting go. And I feel that in the whole thing, it was almost like letting go of the ego in that relationship. And then I let it go, and it didn't occur in my mind. I was okay with it. And then 3 months later, I received an email from Transport for London saying, we've got your bowl. And I was just like, I couldn't believe it. So yeah, she's got it. I've given her the bowl, but it was like with like no attachment, to the outcome of how she'd react, or because I'd kind of just already processed that. So it's kind of like God gave me, I think, the gift of processing in practicing almost, so that I could just give it with pure love. So yeah, that was a real beautiful miracle. And the last miracle I'll share, because I just think it's really cool, is I had this, again, my higher power was giving messages that it was time to give a direct amends to my ex-husband. And I was like, no way. I was like, not gonna happen ever. Like I was so resistant to this. But I kept getting this message. And I discussed it with my therapist, and she said, well, you know what, if you just pray for the willingness, maybe you'll find that it's sports day and you're watching your daughter run the race, and you just turn around and you say, hey, I'm sorry about all that, or whatever. You just never know. And it happened. It was on sports day, and I work in a legal arena sort of now. I do. And we were next to each other, and he said, oh, you're doing kind of some legal stuff, so you didn't get enough of it when we went to court then, did you? And I just turned around, I said, about that, I'm really, really sorry. And I then verbalized exactly what I was sorry on, because I'd been thinking about it for like the last month since I got the message to give a direct amends. I'd been like stewing over it, and I let him say his piece. There was no but, because everything before the but is flushed down the toilet when there's a but, you know. There was just, I just listened, and it was an incredibly liberating process. And the only conversation we've had that has been not triggering, no, it's triggering. It was like we haven't had a conversation prior to that or post that has not been dysfunctional. Essentially, it was the only one. And I really think my higher power created that opportunity for me. And what happened is that when I left the marriage, I wanted it to be the most Disney divorce you'd have ever imagined. And we'd be besties, and like we'd go on holiday together. And I had a really, really strong vision for how our divorce would be. That was blown to smithereens. And in part of this, enforcing this, we are going to be really friendly. I wrote this letter, said, this is what I want for our divorce. And here's a song that really encapsulates it. I'm a bit embarrassed now about that. And the song was basically the song at the time that come out that was like, thank you for showing me the light through us breaking up. We will find ourselves, and now we'll sit and we'll laugh about it together. And it was just, yeah, I mean, we weren't there yet. I thought I was there. I was completely in denial. He definitely wasn't there. I definitely wasn't there. Like, neither of us were there. But I was really wanting our divorce this is going to be the anthem of our divorce, basically, this song. And what happened was that after I gave my amends, I had a break in the sports day events. I went down to the Freedom Confetti River and I prayed to God. And I cannot share the liberation and expansiveness that I felt, the release. Oh my gosh, it was so beautiful. And I got back in the car and I switched the radio on. And I don't normally have the radio, I have a CD. Switched the radio on. Having not heard that song in 2 years, that was a song that was on the radio. Higher power. I think higher power. So yeah, I write down these miracles, and just reading them back is really a great affirmation as well in terms of a tool. It's really restores faith when I'm feeling in despair, hopeless, like I'm not supported, like higher powers abandoned me. There is never a moment that higher power abandons me. I just haven't looked up. I've turned my back, or there are barriers in the way, but I don't believe my higher powers ever abandoned me. And if I look back throughout my life, which I have done, I've written down the miracles prior to inviting higher power into my life, and higher power's always been there. Yeah, so that was that. The miracles list, I think, is a fantastic thing to keep. I'm on number, I only started it in another fellowship. I started the miracles list in last November. I started fellowship. I'm on 200 and I think it's 87. It's great. Next one, okay, a pause. Pause is an amazing tool, absolutely amazing tool. So the first pause I'd say is I remember when I had a real shame spiral, and I phoned up my sponsor and I was like, okay, I'm feeling this. I've done outreach and I've journaled about it, and I've sat down and I've done my prayers, and I've can we have an action plan now for when I have a shame spiral? And she said to me, have you tried just sitting with it? And I was like, sorry, what? She's like, have you tried sitting with it? I was like, what? So you mean like doing nothing? She was like, yeah, just maybe sitting with it. So there's a pause in that sense, and I'm now far more familiar with that's my go-to. So if I feel big feelings, actually the first thing is, before I do anything, do nothing. That's a really good place to start. And I think the reason why I would do something is because, number one, I was so used to seeking adrenalization. I was medicating with activity, and I didn't trust myself to be able to hold me with strong emotions. I think that was the big thing. Whereas I've had to really build trust in myself, and that's come from a trust in a higher power. So now I am able to sit because I trust that actually, whatever comes up, my higher power has enough faith in me that I can actually handle it. So that's the kind of the first pause, and to just really sit. But other pauses. So, and this is to do with boundaries. So if I get triggered, no action for 24 hours, like with certain things, like for example, a triggering text, I do not reply. It's just like a kind of a standard, bottom line. But what I do, not so often now, I kind of just wait. But actually, what I did used to do, because I'd be so compulsively obsessed with getting my 2 pennies worth in, that what I'd then do is reply in text, but not send it. So I'd put it in a different, I wouldn't do it on the messages, I'd write it in my notes or something. So I'd write the reply that I would have reacted with. And then what I found that was really helpful, because then I'd go back to it 24 hours later, and I'd always think, oh my goodness, thank God I didn't send that. Like I could see what flow of codependency diarrhea would have come from it. Like so that was actually really, really helpful. I'd also write letters. So, I'm really angry, I'll write it all in a letter, like just let it all out. And then go back to it and realize how filled with resentment and jealousy and hatred and all the stuff, it would be there in black and white. And I think, okay, but I need the pause to be able to look on it with some clarity. Also, okay, I put down boundaries practice. Okay, yeah, so where I've got to with boundaries is I'm far, far better at putting boundaries in place, which is a natural transgression from what do I feel, what do I want, what do I need? It's identifying those needs. But sometimes what will happen, especially when I go into child, I go into that fight, flight, kind of freeze, fawn response, is that the event will happen, I'll feel stuff, and I won't have the capacity to put the boundary in contemporaneously. I can't do it at the time. So the stuff happens, the situation's finished, it's over, and then later I'll be like, that really violated my boundary and I couldn't say it at the time. So I have faith that I'll become better at that, and actually the less triggering, the better I am at putting boundaries in place at the time, which I couldn't do at all before. So I think that's a journey I'm on. But what I will do as part of almost like a bit of amends and recognition that I didn't put the boundary in place, but this is the boundary that I need to have, is I then in the mirror have the conversation I should have had with that person. And so I practice what my words would be, how they would come out. And it's a really good thing to do with a trusted fellow as well. So for example, I had a boundary violated, and then I realized, okay, my boundary's been violated. I didn't say anything at the time, but I need to assert it now. And I was on outreach, and my fellow said, okay, so how would that sound? Okay, you pretend I'm that person. What would you say? And then what came out was my boundary wrapped in a whole load of, oh, I'm really sorry if I'm hurting your feelings. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. The whole thing. I don't know if you're familiar with that. I'm very familiar with my boundary is completely diluted by the apologetic thing around it. And then and this is with a very trusted, loving, and honest fellow, because they were like, so I was like, do you have any feedback? They're like, well, that was really nice. And I was like, okay, I sense there's a mother bear here. Come on, let her out. And she was like, that was way too, she gave it to me straight when I asked for it. And that really changed the way that I articulated my boundary. I didn't wrap it up in manipulative compliance. I didn't apologize for having it just completely changed the way I asserted that boundary. So very, very useful. I mean, and outreach just is so incredibly useful. I'm not going to probably go into it that much because I think it sort of speaks for itself. In fact, you know what? When I came to this fellowship, I remember hearing in Ken and Mary's one of their talks, they were like, all our friends are in fellowship. And my first gut reaction was like, that's not going to happen to me. Because I was in so much denial of me being an addict and me being sick that I was like, I'm not going to have friends that are just sick people. I'm just like the mild version of codependency. Yeah. They kind of step in, have a little taste and go back to my perfect life. I mean, that's just no, okay. It wasn't quite that bad. No, it wasn't that bad, but I was definitely like, I'm CoDA light version. Um, and all my really, really deeply intimate relationships are in fellowship or in with people who have a spiritual connection. And yeah, it is my life. I mean, it is my life. Fellowship is my life, and spirituality and living life in a different way is the new life. And that's from outreach. That's from picking up the phone and being really vulnerable and being honest. And I feel incredibly lucky to know that if I'm like on the floor, snot dribbling from my nose, tears coming out like a fountain in my eyes, I can call somebody. And I wouldn't have done that before, because I would not have been able to present anything less than the perfect self. I was very happy to call you and discuss it after I had wrapped up the problem in a bow, and kind of the whole look at me and how strong I am and how well I handled it, because now I'm out of it. I was really good at doing that. I was not good at letting anyone see the broken me. And that's why it was so lonely. And it's from outreach that loneliness has disappeared, like the promises have said. So yeah, it's an incredible tool, as are meetings. So I really feel it when I don't attend meetings. I don't tend to attend when the girls are with me. Sort of single parenting is quite full on. So I'll do my daily practice, but the meetings will slip, and that's when I really up the meetings when I don't have them. And I will absolutely feel the difference. There's never ever a time that I've regretted going to a meeting, ever. Even if it's just one nugget of gold that I get from the meeting, it has the propensity to change my life, because life is just a series of different decisions, and literally one decision can change the entire trajectory of my life. Walking into that room in January of 2020 changed my life. It's one decision. So yeah, meetings are incredible. Oh yeah, I mentioned bottom lines. Okay, another tool, bottom lines and top lines. So those are kind of, I find bottom lines and top lines are basically a kind of boundaries and rewards in a sense. So bottom lines, I put down a few of my examples. They're kind of bottom lines, if you're not familiar with what they are, they're just things that if I engage in that behavior, activity, or interaction, it will spark me off into my codependent behaviors. Generally, it's like doing things that aren't very loving or safe. So a couple of my bottom lines are: don't Google my university nemesis. And it would apply to ex-boyfriends or girlfriends or partners or whoever as well. But, I tend to do it when I'm like feeling a bit, it's like I feed my codependency. I'm not feeling so great. So what do? Google my university nemesis. It makes such perfect sense, doesn't it? This is why this is such an insane disease, but that is the bottom line. Not good for me. I don't feel good afterwards. Don't go internet window shopping when I don't have the financial resources to spend. It seems a bit cruel, right? It's a bit cruel. So, I mean, these are just little examples. Don't go through old triggering texts, like I burnt the court documents. It's not a great idea to read them. I also remember during sticky times, I would audio record conversations and arguments between my ex-husband and I, and I did it because I hadn't told anyone what's going on in my marriage. And for some weird reason, and I don't actually think it's that weird because I've heard other people have done this too, I would record the conversation because I wouldn't feel so alone, and I'd feel like no one would ever believe what's going on. So I'd record it, but then what I would do is I'd listen back to those recordings. Absolutely fatal. It's like, itching that scab until I'm bleeding again. And why do it? So I deleted them all. But that was the bottom line for a while. Don't listen. Now I can't listen. They're deleted. I feel so much more free. Top lines. just I put down some simple things like have a long bath with no electronics, walk in nature, massage. I kind of save up so that every 3 months I can have a massage, which seems incredibly abundant and prosperous. And you know what I found is that uh, top lines can convert into bottom lines. For example, a top line might be I have 8 hours sleep every night. And no, sorry, I have a top line could be I have 8 hours sleep a night. And then when it gets regular, it becomes a bottom line so that I have no less than 8 hours sleep a night. So it can kind of convert like that. I put down the next one, post-its. So all over, and having moved, I haven't moved all the I haven't rewritten the post-its, but at my old house, I had post-its everywhere, like all the slogans that really resonated with me, all the things I needed to work on. It really like in discreet places. So like on my coffee machine, places where I'd have them. Two I really remember. On my coffee machine, it was what other people think of me is none of my business. I love that one. And I have the freedom to say yes. I have the freedom to say no, and I have the freedom to change my mind. And that one's a really good one because I would feel like a flake if I changed my mind. It was associated with shame, so it was really important I gave myself the freedom to do that. I put down therapy. So when I entered step one, my first sponsor described it as performing open heart surgery on yourself. It was really, really hard, and I was on unmanageability the entire time. I found that it gets a heck of a lot worse before it gets better. That's just my experience of doing the steps. But if that's yours, don't worry. It gets better. I mean, don't quit 5 minutes before the miracle thing. But I needed more help. So I got a therapist who was familiar with 12-step fellowship. And I was seeing her every week, and I did that for a year. And then for the second year, I still did it every week until I finished the steps. And I still see my therapist every fortnight. And it's something I really plan into I put it into my spending plan. It's, I will cut down on other stuff, but I prioritize my therapist every 2 weeks. And I'm no longer in unmanageability. Not say never, but I don't live in it. But I find that it's just like maintenance. It's like, getting my body really fit. Would I stop going to the gym? No, it doesn't make sense. It's like a real mental maintenance. So for me, I plan to continue that. Maybe at reduced frequency. I don't know. I'll see what my higher power says, but possibly for life. Yeah, because it benefits me. Again, even that one golden nugget of information can change the trajectory of my life. So it's worth its weight in gold, I think. I put down step 9. So I'm jumping a little bit, but one of the tools I used was I printed out photographs of all the people that I wanted to make amends to, and I put them on my shrine. And I would meditate every day and do a Tonglen meditation. So that originates in Buddhism. And with Tonglen, I would close my eyes, and when I breathe in, I'd imagine breathing in, like in black smoke, all the pain and hurt and I'd caused that person. And then it enters me, and the black smoke melts away a black stone in my heart. And then as I breathe out, I'm releasing golden light towards that person. And I found that a really beautiful and effective way of preparing me whenever the time was right to make those amends. And just really visualizing them. I'm quite visual, so photographs really help for me, having them on my shrine. Service. Yeah, I mean, service has been really great for taking me outside of me, like me, myself, and I. Very humbling. It also gets me to places where if I'm feeling that tiny bit of my addict's like, you don't need to go to a meeting, you're fine on your own. It's like, no, I have to go. And again, like I said, I never ever regret it. Got me familiar with the literature, reading the preamble every week and stuff. So that's really good because it kind of gets into that neurological system. And also I found business meetings, like at the beginning, I just thought, these are boring. But actually, they are incredible as how to interact with other people. I love that saying that it's the steps that keep me from killing myself and the traditions that keep me from killing other people. I think it sounds much better in American, in the sense that it's like the steps keep me from committing suicide and the traditions keep me from committing homicide. We don't have that word in the UK, homicide, but it works really well. So I like that. But it's like, in service and in business meetings, it's learning to how to like be with a group about equality and having an equal vote and letting go of the fact that I think I came up with the best idea and no one else thinks of that. And it's just, and then seeing how that pans out and being proved wrong. And I just think it's an incredible tool in the real world. So even like when I'm making family decisions, we sit down and we all discuss it and then we have a vote. And it's really, really healthy. So service, including business meetings, are brilliant. I put down a fear inventory. So when I'm really scared, a fear inventory is really helpful. And there are 5 columns to my fear inventory. And the first one is, what am I afraid of? The second one is, what will happen? And that's kind of the whole catastrophizing. My fear will be like, my kids will end up on the streets and homeless and into drugs and every addiction there. I'll catastrophize beyond measure. Then the third one is, how do I try and manage this fear? And normally that brings up what defects I'm playing into. Because when I'm in fear, I'm going to act out, or at least act out my thinking. I mean, that's another step 10 question of mine. How do I think or act codependently today? But so how do I try and manage my fear? The fourth one is, does this fear remind me of anything? And that's taking you back to my childhood. Anything over a 3 out of 10 in its intensity when it comes to emotional reactions is my history. When it's hysterical, it's historical. So it kind of can take me back to that child, so I can invite in compassion. Number 5, what's missing in me that I have this fear? And then that gets me onto the solution. So am I lacking in faith, in acceptance, in humility, in gratitude? What am I lacking? And then when I have that solution, because I've identified what I'm missing, that's when I can step into it after the acceptance, of course. The whole process is a bit of like shining a light upon something. So it's acceptance. And then I can start meditating or working on that solution when I know what I need. In fact, on my vision board, that's one of the things I asked myself. So when I said, okay, this vision that I have, or these multiple visions I have, what do I need to let go of so that this vision that my higher power has for me can manifest in my life? And what qualities do I need to integrate, to welcome, so that this vision can manifest in my life, so I can better live out God's purpose? So my vision board that I showed before, so I've got faith, acceptance, gratitude, and humility. But and those are the ones I kind of just meditate on working on those, and it leads me to the next right step usually. Let's see if I've got anything more on my list. No, I think. Oh, I've got one more. Yeah. Which is a self-compassion ritual. So I gave myself a hug like this. And then actually what I find is really, really loving for me is I stroke my face. And then whilst doing that, I give myself loving messages, and as well as reminding myself that I'm not alone. So it's like the whole world is suffering. What you're feeling like right now, and in this particular situation, it was as a parent, I go, every parent will have been in the same situation that you are. Every human being will have been in this situation. These feelings that you're having, you're not alone. We're in the same boat. And then just repeat like really positive, loving messages like, you're not alone. You are loved. I love you. And the thing is, this is all very much in line with 12-step, with CoDA. It's nothing new. But I think what was new for me was practicing at a time where I felt I needed to fix a situation. So without taking what I would have done, okay, my girls are, let's say, having a fight, they are crying or they're upset. My instinct is, let me help you, let me fix you, let me get involved with you. Now, if I'm completely held, if I'm staying absolutely an adult and I've got beautiful boundaries between their emotions and mine, and I'm retaining my serenity and I haven't got into hypervigilance and I'm all there, I can absolutely do that. I can be there either as observer, a mediator, I can do that, right? Because I'm not emotionally involved. But if I'm starting to get emotionally involved, the worst thing I can do, the worst place I can be is right in their business. And the best thing I can possibly do for myself and them and others is to love and give compassion to myself. And I gave it a go. I thought, well, what I'm doing isn't working, so let's try something different. And I found it miraculous that I calmed myself down, and somehow it dissipated the angst, the adrenaline, whatever was going on in the atmosphere. The fact that I could bring something different, bring someone different, that's what influenced the situation to potentially bring serenity. Doesn't always work, but certainly getting in there with my emotions makes everything worse. And it's really good modeling. It's really good modeling that when I'm feeling stressed and in pain and my girls can see me like just loving myself and being kind to myself, it's great modeling. And that's kind of step 12 in action as well.